I had mixed expectations toward this show. On one hand, you have my one of, if not the most anticipated and honestly unexpected comic book adaptations probably ever, based off one of the best comic books in history, and in some bizarre fashion it got quite a big budget. So, but at the same time, I saw at least a few red flags. First of all, the waiting time. The first time I've heard about this show was what, 2018, 19 maybe? This is a long ass time. It could have meant that the creators just were given more time to work on the show, make it great, but at the same time it could have meant that Netflix was unsure about the show, that they were changing some stuff up. Maybe the studio could have intervened. Second one, and this is probably just my thing, but the announcement that David Goyer will be a co-writer was for me just a big blow. I hate the way this guy writes dialogues. The dialogues he writes have so much unnecessary pomposity and seriousness in the worst way that I can't stand it, and this is a type of show where the most impact was going to be delivered in the way the dialogues are written and the way they are delivered, and let's just say that Goyer didn't have my trust. Third of all, the trailers. They were surprisingly vanilla. They showed just another show from Netflix that everybody would forget about in like week after it comes out, and I definitely did not want that. But were any of my doubts actually right? Well, no, actually none of them. Because Sandman is definitely one of this year's best shows, and it's possibly one of the, if not the most unique show Netflix has ever produced. It's absolutely unbelievable. It's weird, fascinating, and completely different in every way from almost anything that ever came out in television or in movies. Let's start from something that may seem a bit of a weird starting point of this review, but in the case of this show, it will be probably the best start, because it is one of the most unique thing about the experience that is Sandman, which is the structure of the show. This show has 10 main episodes, and the, I guess, additional one, hard to call it an additional one when it's definitely a must watch as much as it is. This episode is excellent and is absolutely necessary. The stories are built in a completely different way than basically anything on television, and almost every single one are told in a different way. We have a simple one episode, one story type. You know them from almost everything. You have one story that takes few episodes. You have episodes when they tell few stories in them that are basically separate. And you have, on the surface, one episode, one story, but they all come together in borders of one story. And it's all done in 11 episodes. Does it sound crazy? Yeah, cause it's fucking bonkers. This is not the way that you ever see in a TV show. This is basically the way that you tell stories in a comic book, which is where the structure is much more fluent. While it may seem as a wrong part of the comic book being adapted to a TV show, where it basically had no right to translate from one medium to the other, but this very simple element gives this show so much uniqueness and immediately puts the show in a completely different bag compared to almost anything else, especially in terms of fantasy television. It makes this show so much more dynamic because the show never gets boring because of it, because you basically never know when everything is going to start, when the story is going to end, and even what type of story are we watching. Are we watching a part that is basically to add to the lore and add to the characters, or the one that is more consequential to the entire world of Sandman? And B, it makes of this show so great because if you want to slow it down, you take a story and make it into few episodes. But if you don't need few or even one episode to say the story that you want to tell, they just take 30-40 minutes, goodbye and good night. It gives the creator so much freedom to tell every part of the story, exactly how they want to tell it. It does not restrict them in any way in terms of a structure, and it makes the show never drag on because they know how much time they need to tell every single story, and they just take exactly that amount of time. Not a minute more, not a minute less. It makes Sandman feel less like a TV show but more like an experience, which, knowing the original, is exactly what you should want in something based on a comic book like that. So maybe let's talk about how the show works in terms of the story, overarching or the separate ones. I talked about there being different and mostly separate stories told throughout the show, but how not in all of them Sandman is the main character that takes the most screen time is very interesting. So you may ask yourself, why the hell is the show called Sandman if he isn't the main character? And that would be a wrong question. There is no doubt for a second that Morpheus is the main character of this show. We just see the stories that are maybe not strictly about him, but they all are connected to him. He's an important character in every single one of them. He's the catalyst that connects everything throughout this show and connects this entire world together, which makes this world seem much more real. Like there is something happening at all times in this show, that every human being in this universe has a story to tell, an interesting story to tell. Everything revolves around Sandman, but the people are as greatly written and as important as the god himself. A lot of it is based on the original comic book, but we don't get a lot, if ever, anything like that in television. It again gives us more motivation to keep watching, because you don't know when a great character that will be important for at least a part of the story will appear. And it always is a different pace with every character. You take more time with one, you give more time to Sandman, a different one. But at the same time, every character is great and all of it works excellently. It all comes together greatly as one consistent product. Maybe while we're at it, let's talk about the main character, the King of Dreams. Morpheus may be a really deceptive character when you give him a first look. That he is a stereotypical godlike character that we got quite a lot of television, and that he is an ultimate emo. The way that he acts and he looks and the way he acts, I absolutely love him. And honestly, you wouldn't be that far off, but there is a lot more to Sandman than you may think. With every episode we learn more how he acts, why he acts like that, both lore-wise and character-wise. And you realize that there is a lot more layers than you may think, but there is also this great mystique about. A lot of shows and movies have a great problem with keeping the mystique about the character while still making them a full-fledged character. A great example, Michael Myers. Feels like they try to give more to Michael while they keep killing the mystique about. And the way Morpheus is written, they keep the mystique to the absolutely last second. He feels and he acts like a god, and it's, in my opinion, excellently acted, showing at the same time as little emotions as possible. But you could clearly see that he does have emotion, he does care, and when his emotions are supposed to shine, they shine brighter than a fucking sun. Also, a very key and very important thing, he is growing throughout this show. Every story, every encounter, every new thing he learns makes him better, which is one of my favorite things in television, the growth of characters throughout them. And if you thought that there won't be any in Sandman because he is a god, he is basically as old as Earth, you would be incorrect, Chief. He is a great character that keeps you glued to the screen through the entirety of this show. I don't want to go too much in detail about the rest of the characters, mainly because I feel like the less you know about the stories and characters in them, the better will be the experience that we will get. But I will say, I love all of these characters. Some more, some less, but I love all of them. But I want to talk about my biggest, wouldn't call it a problem, but my biggest doubt about the character in this show. And this is the way they shown Lucifer. The King of Hell this time around is a bit changed compared to his comic book versions, at least from his own comic book. I mainly know Lucifer from that. And I'm a big fan of Lucifer the comic book, and I'm not entirely sure about the new version. You had no doubt that the comic book version of this character was an angel, but he gave this unsettling vibe of, I have a plan, you probably won't like it, and you won't see it until it happens. And he also felt like he is above everything. And following his actions was really interesting and very intriguing. It kept you on the edge of your seat, because you basically never knew what's about to happen. What is his plan? And you always knew that everything, no matter how on the surface was not going according to this plan, was going exactly according to his plan. The TV show version seems much more posh and angelly, whatever that word may mean. And it went more for a unsettling, powerful vibe. And it feels a bit like a downgrade, but at the same time, I will give it time, because I can see that they may be something great in there. And let's be honest, there wasn't much Lucifer in this show, so maybe this version of Lucifer just needs more time. And I will sure give it. I have utmost trust in the writers. Let's talk about how world building and the lore is being done in the show, because it is definitely an interesting one. We all know how fantasy and sci-fi television and movies deliver their world building. A lot of exposition, and they always give us a lot of information. Some of them only for lore purposes, some of them to tell the story. It's simple, it works, I guess, most of the time, if done right. No need to change the formula, right? Wrong. Sandman has its own idea for the way it wants to build the world, and it may seem like a weird one for a lot of people, because they explain as little as possible, and they show everything. They show how the world works. They only explain things that are necessary for understanding the story of the show. But in terms of world building, the rules and such, they don't explain almost none of it. Some of you may think that this is too much, but for me this was exactly on the border of being as vague as possible to build interest, and no crossing the border of giving us too little and showing us too much that you are unable to connect any of the dots because there is too many. I love the way this show makes you think, but at the same time this isn't overcomplicated. When watching this show, you have to use your brain to understand how this world works, which is great, but at the same time, connecting the dots, while it may seem complicated at first, it isn't really that complicated, and it's just fun to connect the dots yourself. And the world that they're showing is absolutely stunning, intriguing, and most importantly, the world is fun. Learning about it and exploring it is one of the best part about this show, and I definitely want more of it. I want to talk about one thing that would probably fit in the intro, but I intentionally left it for now. One of the reasons I was pessimistic towards this show is that I always thought that this comic book is a bit unadaptable for live action, because you need the visuals to make this world as interesting as it is in comic books. The video effects, the green screens, the character looks seemed a bit unachievable in live action form, especially with a TV show budget. And I don't really see this type of comic book being adapted to a movie. But god damn it was I proved wrong. This show is absolutely stunning. The effects look real and unreal at the same time. The world looks beautiful. The characters look excellent. I want to give the highest praise for the people who worked on the visuals, because this is top shelf and they can definitely be proud of themselves. The last thing I want to talk about is the potential problems of this show. I hate the sentence that I'm about to say, but I have to say, it's not a show for everyone. I could absolutely see people getting tired of the weird pace, or get completely lost in the story and the world building, getting weirded out by the acting. This show is definitely not a background watch. You have to focus and listen and watch all of it, and missing even small bits may cause a lot of problems. But for me, this is definitely one of the best shows I have seen this year. This is interesting, new, well written, unique, and absolutely fascinating. I love every single bit of it, and I, with no doubt in my mind, give this show a 10 out of 10. But hey, if you disagree, if you have a different opinion, or do you just want to discuss the show, I would be more than interested to hop out on a discussion in comments.